Hi, I'm Chad, and you're watching Squarebody Stuff. Hey, welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're going to be working on the 454 that I'm building for Cream Puff, my daily driver. This time we're going to be doing cam bearings. So in our last video on this big block, we done the freeze plugs. Not a big deal, but you know, right now we're just kind of taking baby steps, walking you through the whole process of building an engine. I know I've done that on the 339 that's in old Squeaky here, but I figured we'll just go through it again. I think you guys enjoy these type of videos, and you know, the longer I do these videos, the longer I'm in this, the better videos I put out. So hopefully this video on cam bearings will be better than the last one I put out. So if you want to keep up on what we're doing on this channel, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. That way you get notifications whenever I put out new videos. You can also join the membership, and you'll get first dibs or first viewing of any videos I put out, because I always make them available for the members, regardless if I put it out 3 days or 4 days before the video is actually going to hit live, or sometimes it's just earlier that day. Yeah, things get jumbled up. Sometimes it's hard to juggle everything, get everything done. Right now, I'm working a bunch of hours at work, a bunch of overtime. So I got I don't have as much time to spend in the shop as I used to or have in the last few months. So anyways, we're gonna get some stuff done on this 454. And old Tex is enjoying the heat in the wood stove. I woke up this morning about 5:30. It was 17 degrees outside. The shop was still around 23 degrees. So I came out and built the fire so I get it good and warmed up. And you're probably wondering what I've got going on right here. Well, since this block was really cold, I mean, it wasn't as cold as the air, because underneath my workbench I do have one of those oil heaters that stays on, that keeps my table, it kind of keeps it around 50 degrees, 40, 50 degrees. So the block wasn't completely cold, but I didn't want it to be, you know, 50 degrees and trying to drive some cam bearings in there. So what I did was I got out my trusty old heater here, got it set up, put that piece of cardboard to kind of trap the air in there, and it was just, the air flows through the cylinders, keeps the heat to kind of warm that block up to an even temperature. I was trying to get it around 100 degrees, and I would spin it every little bit just to try to get it all nice and even. I think, let me get my thermometer, let me see what it's up to. I know I got it way over 100 degrees. It's at 113 now. I've had the heat off for about 20 minutes and just kind of let it soak. But it was up to about 140, and even if you go inside here, it's about an even temperature. It's nice and warm, and that'll help. That'll keep the bearing journals bigger, and you could also add a little extra heat or something to each journal as you're driving the bearings in. But the bearings I've had in the freezer all night, which I probably could have kept them outside and they would have been colder, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be doing this project today or not. So anyhow, they're in the freezer and letting them chill out. I've got them in a cooler with some ice in it, so that way they'll stay cold while I'm driving the bearings in. But let's get them out of the freezer. I'm going to show you what I've got and little things I do with the cam bearings. Instead of getting these cam bearings out and handle them and get them a little bit warmed up, I got another set of big block cam bearings. Cam bearings are pretty basic, not a whole lot to them. The big blocks just have the one little hole. Now you will have to pay attention to the numbers. They have listed the bearing number and then what journal they go in. This one should be number 1, position number 1, and it'll be, I think, the largest bearing in there. And the numbers are usually stamped right there on the outside, that way you know which ones they go to. Now, another thing I like to do with these bearings is I've got a little countersink bit, and I'll get in there and just kind of chamfer that inside and the outside of the hole, just to make sure there's no casting or no, I don't know, it'd be called casting flash, but make sure there's nothing there. It's going to, on those edges, makes it flow a little easier. I guess you could enlarge them, but your cam journals don't really need a bunch of oil. You know, it wouldn't hurt anything to enlarge them. I rarely do unless I think I did on the engine that's in Squeaky, but this engine here is not going to be a high revving performance racing engine. It's just for a daily driver, so not going to get a bunch of tips and tricks and stuff to it. But you also want to inspect your bearings, make sure there's no no rough edges, no chips or scratches or anything in it. And if there is, you could usually dress them up a little bit. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of a burr, something on this edge, or a little nick from the manufacturing process. Now the big blocks are a little bit different than the small blocks as far as how the camshaft gets oiled. On the small blocks, it actually oils to the camshaft journals first, goes around them because the block will have the groove cut in the block, and it'll actually travel around the cam bearing to the main journals. Big blocks, it's I guess they call it priority main. The oil goes to the mains first and then to the camshaft. And from the camshaft, on journals 1 through 4, that's where it ends. It just goes to the camshaft. On journal number 5, and I'll show you here in just a second, it's got the groove in it, and that's where the oil to your lifters comes from. It's kind of hard to get the camera in there to see, but this is journal number 4. 3, 2, and 1 are the same. It just goes straight through to the cam journal. I guess I could roll the block over. Maybe you could see up in there the hole. So with the big blocks, you need to line up the hole in the bearing with that hole. You don't need to clock it differently like you do on a small block. Now here on number 5, for all the journals, mains and camshaft, oil comes from this side of the engine, comes through this hole, and on number 5, it does have that groove around it. And the oil will flow in between the cam bearing and inside that groove to oil your lifter galleys. And that's what these holes on the side of a block are on a big block. These are the passages that are drilled through the main oil passage going this way. It drills through to connect to this passage, which then either goes to the camshaft or up to the main bearing. And obviously the rods get oiled through the crankshaft itself from that main bearing journal. There are, I think it's 2 years in the early 60s, I'm wanting to say 66, 65 and 66, that the rear number 5 cam journal isn't machined this way. The actual camshaft has the groove cut in it. So if you have one of the early 396 blocks, you need to pay attention to that, because you may need to have the correct camshaft to go with your block. But we don't have that here. From I think 67 to present, they're all like this one here. So let's talk about, now I've already talked about the orientation of the hole for number 1 through 4 journals. Number 5, I mean, you can look it up and gather a bunch of information, and I've always just lined the hole up the same as the rest of them, because that hole in the bearing is only going to flow so much, regardless of where it's at, you know, on that groove. I prefer just to line it up like the rest of them. That way that journal is getting oiled the same as the rest of them, and the lifter valleys, or the lifter galleys, are going to get the same amount of oil regardless of where that hole is. That hole is just providing oil for the camshaft itself. All right, let's talk about the tool I'm using. This is just a cheap universal cam bearing installer that I got from, I think, Amazon or something. But you'll have to watch out, because these rubber bushings that come with it, that the bearing actually goes on, and you spread it out to hold the bearing on, takes up too much space. This ring here isn't quite big enough diameter, so the bearing, there's nothing for the bearing to like actually hit on, because the inside of that bearing's tapered, so you don't want to go shove this through the bearing. That's not good. It'll ruin the bearing. So I take this off, And I just put a few wraps of electrical tape around there. That way I've got a good surface for that bearing to butt up against to drive it in. And the reason I've got the block off the engine stand and on the table is because, well, for one, this freeze plug, cord plug, whatever, I couldn't reach while it was on the stand. Needed it off the stand for that. Also, I'll need to have this to go from the back side to get the #1 journal in, or the #1 bearing in for the cam, and also access the plug that plugs the back of the block for the cam boss. All right, we're going to start with journal #4. You get your tool in there, get the bearing in there. It doesn't need to be super tight. Okay. That should be close. Give it a few taps. I think we're going in good and straight. Put another. Now you've got this cone, and that'll help keep the bar centered in the front journal or the rear journal if you're going from the back. That keeps everything nice and straight. Alright, may have went a little too far, and that's okay. We can always drive it back a little bit. Yeah, I got a little carried away. Not sure if you can see that or not. Just went a little bit too far. It would probably be okay, but I'm gonna go ahead and drive it back the other way to get it just right. You know, I could have edited this out and you guys would have been none the wiser, but I just want to leave it in here to show you that that's why sometimes it's just easier to have a machine shop do it. They know how to do it better. I don't do this very often. It's been probably 2 years or over a year since I've done this last time, so I don't have the touch, you know, and they probably got a better tool that has a stop, that it'll stop at a certain spot. This one is easy, apparently. Got one too many good licks in and went just a little bit too far, but I'll flip this around, drive it the other way, get it all good and centered up. All right, I got that one locked in where it needs to be. All right, just time to get the rest of them drove in. They're all pretty much the same thing. Like I said, the end ones, you'll have to go from the inside out on both ends, and then we'll put the plug in the back and our cam bearings will be done. All right, we're gonna test fit the camshaft, make sure that everything lines up good, because now's the time to fix it rather than wait till you're ready to stick the cam in for final assembly or or degreeing it in, then find out you have an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and stick it in there. Now the camshaft I got is a Lunati Voodoo V268H10. The specs are duration at 50 thousandths lift is 227, 233. Yeah, I got it wrote down because I can't remember. I got the cam card in the file box right now. The lift is 542, 554 intake and exhaust respectively, with the LSA of 110 degrees, a lobe separation angle of 110 degrees. RPM range is 1800 to 6200. That's going to be perfect for what we're doing with this thing. I've already got some oil on the bearings. I'm going to clean these journals off with some brake cleaner. Make sure there's none of that, nothing on them. None of the packing grease or whatever they use. Cosmoline is what they used to call it. Alright, I'm going to put a little dab of oil. On the journal. Or camshaft, whatever. You could also go through and use a dial bore gauge, measure your bearings, then measure your camshaft, make sure you have plenty of clearance. Usually I do camshafts kind of by feel. Yeah, I've never really went that far on it. Unless I end up with one like really stiff or something like that, then I'll start checking into it. But most times if you put the cam in and it spins free, you're going to be okay. All right, you got in all the journals. It is spinning nice and smooth. No tight spots. I think we're good to go. All right, last thing we need to do is put our plug on the end of it, or on the back side. I want to clean it out with some brake clean, or carb cleaner, whatever you like to use. Pretty much the same idea as the freeze plugs. You could either use a socket that fits the same side inside diameter as this, or I've got my Delrin stuff that works really good. And you'll need some RTV. Whatever RTV you have handy works fine for this. You don't need the high temp. I just happen to have a high temp that's open. I don't have any of the ultra gray that I usually use for most of the stuff. I don't have a new tube, or I don't have a tube open, so I'm going to use this so I don't open up a new tube and risk the potential of having it cure out on me and waste a tube, which I'm sure we've all done that. And you don't need a ton, and you don't want to put it on the block, because if you put it on the block, jam it in there, any excess is going to get shoved into that bearing or around that bearing, and you don't need that. Whatever excess you have doing it on the plug itself will be on the outside, and you can wipe it off. And a little tip I showed in the last video, and I've showed before, but with your end you cut off of your nozzle, you can use it to stick it back in there. Now it won't seal it indefinitely, but it does help it keep it from curing out. Let's get this booger in there. And you really don't have to worry about driving it too deep. You just don't want to drive it in so deep that you actually get in that bearing or anything. But there's plenty of clearance. I can see it look pretty good. No cleanup. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you've learned something. If you have any questions or comments, just let me know down below. Make sure you check me out on Facebook. I've been dabbling around in TikTok a little bit. I don't do a whole lot on Instagram, but you can go check me out on my other social media pages if you want to. Facebook Messenger is another good way to get a hold of me if you have any questions you want to ask directly to me. But again, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section down below. And yeah, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I think that's all I got for you guys. Until next time, y'all keep your square bodies rolling. We'll catch you later.